All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Adriana. I'm the Assistant Director for Diversity Recruitment in our admission office. We're so excited to have you here. I will let my guests introduce themselves, but this is one of our Faculty Friday sessions where you'll get to learn more about one of our faculty members. So I will hand it off to you, Eva.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you for this opportunity. So my name is Eva Cadavid. I teach in philosophy. I'm starting my 13th year at Center. It seems like a lifetime, but I'm chair of philosophy. I'm also chair of gender studies for the upcoming year. And because we wear many hats, I also, teach courses in the Latin American Studies program.
That's great. Thank you for being with us, Eva. This will be a pretty casual conversation, but one of the things that I would really like is for folks to kind of get to know you a little bit. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about kind of your origin story, maybe a bit about where you grew up, your school, your undergrad experience, maybe how you discovered philosophy or any aha moments. I'd just love to hear more about you.
So it's what's sad is I've been a nerd my whole life. So there's not going to be any major aha moment, maybe. But just to give you a bit of background, my family is from Colombia, and I was born in the States. But my parents, I'm an only child. My parents wanted me to grow up with family, and both of them came from huge families. So I have more cousins than most people would ever imagine. I have well over 50 cousins. I know all of them. I know my second cousins, like I know my mom's cousins, and I like the whole thing. So we moved to Colombia, and I lived there for a little bit, and then moved to Miami. Wow. I grew up in Miami from the age of 10 on. In some ways, a very traditional Latin American family. Most of my high school friends, we all stayed close. We commuted, like we lived at home and we just commuted to college. Wow. Very few of us went out of state, and many of those who went out of state returned within the first year. Mm. And so I stayed close to home. I lived with my parents as an undergrad. I went to Florida International University, and I was very lucky to have a group of really devoted teachers. Mm. They gave us a lot, and I kind of tapped into 3 departments. I tapped into chemistry, I tapped into philosophy, and I tapped into French. Mm. And even from the moment I started college, like I knew when I finished high school, I knew I wanted to study chemistry and I wanted to study philosophy. But of course, I went into chemistry as my main one because, who's going to hire a philosopher, right? Philosophers are like, what? So I started my undergrad, and again, I had a lot of just amazing support. I was very fortunate to be given a scholarship that as long as I didn't graduate, they would keep paying for my classes. And so I took full advantage of that. I started chemistry, and then once I realized that I was on track to finish, I started doing more philosophy, and kind of started going a little bit more into French. And 5th year turns around. I was about 200 credits in, wow. And my philosophy advisor sat me down and said, "You're leaving. We've taught you enough. You have to go." And he's like, "If you don't fill out your paperwork to graduate this year, I will fill it out for you." Wow. And what he did, though, that was really cool, is he recognized how many credits I had. So he did this himself. I did fill out the paperwork to graduate, but he filled out the paperwork to make sure that I had 2 degrees. So I have my Bachelor of Arts and my Bachelor's of Science, wow. Which is pretty cool. And he also gave me great advice, because at the time I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Could I do both? And he's like, well, you may want to do both as a grad, for graduate school, but you should really start with chemistry. No matter what, chemistry, the sciences are changing so much. that you need to make sure, if you are going to be mostly philosophy, or if you are going to be philosophy, you need to make sure that chemistry is out of the picture.
Hmm.
And so my teachers send me on to graduate school in chemistry. And I think I did not take a gap year, which was probably not the best.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up leaving graduate school in chemistry. I was like, you know what? My heart's really in philosophy. And it wasn't just that. I think it was culture shock. It was my first time away from home. And it was going from what was a small school when I was there as an undergrad, to I went to IU in Bloomington, and it was this massive school. And I found myself also being among, I think I was the only Latinx grad student. There were some more women grad students, but I mean, it was just kind of a difficult time. So I just left and went back home, kind of got my act together. That same philosophy professor called me and said, okay, you gave chemistry a try. Now it's time for philosophy. So he brought me back, and I went back to my old school and worked there for a year. My chemistry mentor had me teaching labs, and then my philosophy professors let me sit in their classes for free, which I did, and then they kind of pushed me off to graduate school in philosophy.
Wow. Wow. I don't think I knew about your past in chemistry. That's so interesting. That's neat. I love that. I guess kind of thinking about grad school for you, you know, as we've talked about, my sister is in philosophy, and so I know a little bit, but even if I don't know all of it, I would love to hear a bit about kind of your scholarship. What research focus did you have in grad school, and has that evolved? Are you still doing that research? Tell us about your scholarship.
Sure. So not surprising, right? So going into chemistry, I wanted to figure out what the world was made of, right? So my thing has really been sort of theories of reality. What is it, right? What is it? And I think I realized that philosophy kind of allowed me to answer those questions more. So I went into grad school thinking of, theories of reality, also theories of knowledge. But I went in undecided. In the sciences, you kind of have to choose what your specialty is from the get-go. In philosophy grad school, you can have some ideas, but it's still pretty open. You don't get to decide until about your second or third year. And like I said, I knew I liked theory of reality. And then I took an ancient class with an amazing professor. She is a powerhouse, and she is calm and collected, very, very, has a very, very strong personality without being pushy. Like, she doesn't have a chip on her shoulder, right? I was like, oh my God, I want to be like this person. And through her classes, I fell in love with Plato and Aristotle. And so it kind of shifted me in that regard. But I still wanted to do theory of reality and theory of knowledge. And my work in grad school focused on Aristotle, and specifically like his philosophy of mathematics. Again, science has never really gone far for me. But I was doing a lot of work on what are numbers, what are geometrical objects, right? What are these things, these mathematical objects? And Plato has some really cool things to say. And so I focused on Aristotle, but I was still kind of dabbling with Plato. And once I got to center, I did do a little bit more work with that, but then my interest started to change. One of the things about teaching at or being at a place that's so teaching focused is that your teaching actually starts to inform your research as well.
Interesting.
And and at center at the time that I started, we did have somebody who taught a feminism course, but it was through religion, not through philosophy. There was nothing like that in philosophy. And I was just flabbergasted. I'm like, no, I don't know anything about feminism, like as a theory, but we need to be able to offer our students a chance to learn something about, feminist philosophy. And so I started developing that course. And as I was sort of thinking of those ideas and learning about feminist ethics and teaching my ancient course, I started to see some interesting parallels. And my research has now kind of morphed into one of my research interests is on feminist interpretations of Plato. And that's where I've been, sort of dabbling a little bit more in recent years. But again, sort of being in a teaching place, I also started working with students and became really interested in two things. I became really interested in what we have seen in philosophy is that there's still a lot of underrepresentation of women as well as other groups, right? Racial and ethnic groups. And that the main fall happens in undergrads. So about an equal number, especially in gender, we have a little bit more data on gender, about an equal number of males and females enter introductory courses, but then as they advance to upper level courses, it kind of starts to become mostly male. And so I started doing some research with that, and I started to bring in students, and then I became interested in, how do you do research with students in philosophy? And I'm still playing with both of those, which is really interesting because it's kind of like I have all these different camps, but it gives me a chance to create these really wonderful relationships with my students. Some of them not even in philosophy. I've done work with a behavioral neuroscientist. She worked with me for 3 years before she went and did research in BNS with Professor Skogsberg. I've had people in history, people in politics do research with me for pretty much their full career, their full time at center, and then go on to do other stuff. And so that's been a lot of fun, and it's informed my research in really interesting ways that are interdisciplinary. And anyways, and it's neat to also see my students grow and see how they interact with each other, how they mentor each other. And so I'm still kind of hanging out with that. I have 2 research students that have been with me now for a little bit over a year, and they're going into this new year with me. And I have 2 others that were working with me a little bit last year, and I don't know how they're gonna, we may have to do that informally this year, but yeah, that's what I do.
That's so great. I think knowing you and watching my sister go through, life in philosophy, it's been so interesting to me how broad philosophy really is and how many different kind of sub-disciplines there are within philosophy. And I don't know, I think it's a much broader academic field than what I thought previous to kind of being introduced to that world, which is really great. You mentioned a little bit about kind of your experience at Center and your experience with Center students, and I'd love to hear a bit about kind of how you got to Center and maybe what working with students has been like, both in and out of the classroom. I think we ask our professors to do a lot of mentoring, both formal and informal. I know Zoom, there's a truck passing by, but yeah, I'd love to hear kind of about your experience with that as a professor at Center, how you got here, and then that mentorship aspect with students.
So I was very fortunate that, I've already mentioned I was pretty much public school educated through graduate school in chemistry, and then went into a private graduate school in philosophy, but it was very research oriented. And then I was able to teach as a visiting professor at a liberal arts school, I had no experience with liberal arts schools. Obviously, just from hearing all my interests, you can tell that even as an undergrad, I was kind of doing that thing of combining across disciplines and seeing connections. But I just had no clue. What's a liberal arts school? And so I started teaching there, and I realized that I loved it, and that I was good at it, that I work really well with small groups of students and just getting into the meat of it. I knew I didn't want to deal with graduate students, but I wanted that very rich environment of pushing students and really just being able to connect with them outside of the classroom as well. And when I started looking at jobs, then for real, I only applied to liberal arts schools or small teaching public schools. And most of the schools that were really interested in me were all in this area. I don't know what that says, but it was either Kentucky, Indiana, or Arkansas. And as soon as I had my first interview with Center, I loved it. I loved it. This was where I wanted to be. I loved the colleagues that interviewed me, everybody I met on campus, the students that attended my sample class. They were curious, they were asking questions, they weren't afraid of asking questions, right? So that was really exciting. It was also very early on in having the Posse program. And so Center was at that stage where they were beginning to just bring in more students that were not from Kentucky and this area. So diversify, racially, ethnically, but also first generation students. And I mean, just this world that just appealed to me. And so thinking, and that echoed with me. And so thinking that I could also be working with that population and making a difference in a very immediate way was just so attractive to me. And fortunately, Center liked me too, and they hired me. And and as soon as I sort of landed in Kentucky, I started reaching out. And for me, one of the things, and I think you're an example of this. So I've known you for a very long time. When you were here as an undergrad, you never took a class from me, and yet I knew you, right? And there's so many students that I've gotten to know that, because of their interests, whatever, we never coincided in the classroom, but I still had that opportunity to get to know you as a person and to get to know them as people. And that's something that's fairly unique. And I love that.
Yeah, I tried to take ancient philosophy with you, but it didn't work out. But I mean, it's so true. One of my earliest memories at Center as a student is I had what was then kind of informal lasso group, and it was Alejandra Mosquera and Clea, and they saw me and they asked me if I was interested. And I remember we went to your house and we either had arepas or pupusas, and I had only been at Center for a few weeks. I mean, it was one of the first things I did as a student, but it was so meaningful to me, and I'm sure for a lot of students, to see someone who looked like me teach and to form community in that way. And that was really special. So thank you for that.
Oh my God. So I don't know if that was the time that Cristal Cardona, who had started that group. So I knew who would eat meat and who would not. And I was kind of using my Colombian spices, right? I could try to follow somebody else's recipes, but everything seems to taste Colombian at the end of the day. So I probably made arepas, and I made a big pot of lentil soup, and I miss those days. But yeah.
Let me see. I guess we talked a little bit about changes at center, and I know both you and I are really interested in education equity and access and inclusion. And, I often think of you as kind of a pioneer at Center. There's kind of a cohort of professors who've really led the charge in that way. And I'd love to hear a little bit about the ways that you have really seen Center grow and change during your tenure here.
So one of the things that that I've noticed, so I've said this a little bit before when I was talking about research. I think even though we as professors make a difference in students' lives, and we serve as kind of, I don't know, I mean, yeah, mentors, whatever. I think there's a lot that happens among students, and that's in many ways much more important, especially for retention
Yeah.
and definitely for changing the culture of an institution. And in my time here, what I've seen is I've seen the number of students from both international students, but also racial and ethnic students, to some extent religion, but not as much yet. So we still have a lot of areas to grow.
Yeah.
A lot of areas to go. But at least what I've seen is as more students have started to come in, people have been able to claim their own space, have been able to mentor each other and empower each other. And in many ways, we teach to whomever's in the classroom. And so I think that our students have asked the faculty to teach to them, right? For us to also expand. So one of the really cool things is that I've seen students claim, right, what they need.
Yeah.
Because you've been able to unite, or they've been able to unite. And I think for faculty, it's challenged us and it's pushed us to keep growing and to really expand what we're willing to teach, how we're willing to teach, and to take into account our students. And we see that in the curriculum. There's some classes that are being taught now that, are just mind-blowing, that were not being taught 10 years ago because of the students, and then the faculty that gets hired, and then what people are willing to do. So classes, the fact that we have a social justice minor now, oh my gosh, that is so cool, right? And that there are classes in social movement that are being taught through sociology. It's just across the board, right? Psychology. It's flowing. It's just flourishing and flowing everywhere. And I've only mentioned two, but if you go to every single discipline, you're going to notice that there are now additional courses that are really addressing the needs of our society. And I think that that's in large part also because of our students. And so to me, that's been a big change. Like, for instance, now this fall, there's going to be this cluster of courses that are going to be dealing with COVID-19 and how that's affecting, whether it's medically or socially, right? All sorts of different connections. I think we were a little bit more traditional when I started.
Yeah. I think I haven't been at Center that long, but even from when I was a first year student, things have changed so much, both in, what campus looks like, the kinds of students that we have on campus, but also the change in courses and curriculum has been really neat to see. And it was good to have a little bit of taste of that in kind of my last 2 or so years. But now I get to be envious of all the students that take all of these cool courses. But maybe I'll audit one or something. We'll see.
You're always welcome. Just sort of, and I think that's one of the neat things. Every so often we'll have people, not just people who may be in the type of role that you're in, but also other faculty will sit in each other's classes, will audit each other's classes, just because we can, and it's very welcomed.
Great. That's great. I'll make a note. I guess that leads to my next question. And, is there a class or classes that you really enjoy teaching? Do you have a favorite class that you have taught so far?
So that's kind of a hard question. I think for most of us, there's so many, and there are different classes that become favorites for different reasons. It's sort of like music, right? You have certain music that you like depending on your mood, or depending on, there are all these other factors. And so I think with classes, it's the same way. I love Intro to Philosophy.
Oh.
I'll always love Intro to Philosophy. That's one of my favorites. And part of it is because it's usually a full house. I have 30 students. I may have very few, and probably I may not even have any philosophy majors. And I'll have students from a number of different areas of campus. And I get everything from first years to even graduating seniors. But seeing them, because for many of them, it's their very first time they're encountering philosophy, just like seeing them grapple with ideas, questions, kind of discover what philosophy can do. The fact that it's not just, these limited kind of, questions, or that it's not just all about what is death, right? But that, you're actually like, you can deal with like everyday problems, right?
Yeah.
Things, and you and I have talked a little bit about this precisely because of your sister's research, right? Who has knowledge, and what's the context of knowledge, and what does it mean? Like, how do racial slurs work, right? How does language work? And there are things that have very immediate impact, that it's not just ethics that has that immediate impact. And so seeing students recognize all that and really become empowered with thinking through their views and through their reasons, and giving them the freedom to keep on asking questions, not necessarily have to have answers, and to develop views based on the evidence that they have is just, I think it's just so much fun. It's so much fun to teach. So Intro is one of them. And I'm trying to think of other courses that, ancient I love, but that's because I love ancient philosophy. Give me Plato and Aristotle any day, even with all the complexities and all the, they have all sorts, they have so many issues. They're so paradoxical, but they're so much fun to teach. They're puzzles, right, in and of their own right. For instance, nature and reality, thinking about where we started, right? The fact that I love theories of reality, nature and reality that allows me to bring in some science, to think about philosophy of science. That's really fun too.
I love that. I love that. And it makes hearing you describe the classroom experience is so beautiful. It's like exactly why I love Center, but also why I love kind of the liberal arts experience and this search for knowledge, not necessarily a search for truth, but a search for knowledge, and loving that pursuit and finding that pursuit worthwhile, I think is just so beautiful. I have, I think, like 2 more questions. One of them is, I think there will be some incoming students or prospective students who might watch this, but we might also have some current students. And I'm wondering, what kind of advice would you offer a first-year student coming into Center? And then maybe what wisdom or advice would you share with a student who's graduating from Center?
So my advice for first-year students, and it's something that my advisees have heard me say, is to not feel pressured to decide very early on what they're going to study, to allow themselves to really experience and take classes that call them, right? Things that look interesting, even if it's not clear how they're going to fit into their their major or their minor. Because that's one of the things that a liberal arts education really allows us to do. We encourage it. We think it makes us better human beings long term, right? All of those experiences that you're getting, even if they at first don't seem like they connect, they will. I'm far removed from chemistry, and yet all of those experiences are still enriching even what I teach, how I teach, what I do, how I connect with my students. I would not give up at all any of that. Mm-hmm. I would also tell first-year students, or actually any students, that it's okay to fail. What may seem like a failure, mm-hmm. is really an opportunity to learn and to get up again and move forward, right? Mm-hmm. And again, take it from somebody who actually dropped out of grad school the first time out, right? And then went back and faced it again. Mm-hmm. And that's how it goes. I mean, we're not supposed to have all the answers. We're not supposed to be perfect. We are not perfect. Mm-hmm. I have not met the first perfect person in the world.
Right.
And so I think that's something that I would love for my students to sort of remember and keep in mind. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. Yeah. For the seniors, for my seniors, it's okay to take the time to figure out what you're going to do with your life. Right. I think gap years are good. I think going 100% from, first grade or kindergarten all the way through to you graduate from center, and you're just going to run into something else. It's like, oh my gosh, at some point you need to reflect, you need to take a breather, you need to really start to feel comfortable and kind of think of, what is it that I want to do? You don't owe anybody an answer, or you don't need to have it figured out, especially not at 22, 23, right? I'm in my early 50s and I still don't have it fully figured out, right? I mean, it's okay. And in the world today, much more so than maybe what, for my students, what their grandparents were doing, right? We don't stay in just one job. We're called to do a lot of different things, and things are changing so much that it's really about flexibility, curiosity, willingness to learn, to tackle, to shift, and to find your own space in the world, and trusting that it will happen.
That's wonderful. That's a message I could have used as a senior. So thank you. I hope our seniors will be able to take that in, because it's so true. My last question is kind of more of a reflection on what I've been focusing on lately, which is joy. And I'd love to hear a bit about, what are the things that bring you joy?
Oh my goodness. So I'm a very, I don't know that it's optimistic, but I guess I am optimistic. So I believe in hope. So maybe I'll tackle it that way. Things that bring me hope, or things that I find very rewarding. The people in my life. I think one of the things that's been obvious to me, just from all of my experience, is that everything else kind of comes and goes, but the people in your life are the ones that are really going to carry you through and are really going to make it meaningful. And so my family, my friends, obviously you've noticed my students, right? I think that that's something that gives me hope and makes my life joyful and meaningful. I've on and off for a very long time have done either meditation or yoga. I don't think that I ever made it past the beginner level, right? Once upon a time I could do headstands. I never made it much past that, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It's, every day is different when you sit down to meditate or you come to the mat to do yoga. And so to me, that kind of grounds me. And that makes things makes, again, sort of just makes me a better human being, hopefully. Um, and the other thing would be nature,
Mm.
right? Being outside, enjoying, disconnecting from um, our very fast-paced virtual life, and just enjoying nature and the stability,
Mm.
right? And this whole world that kind of makes it clear that I am not the center of the universe, or that humans are not the center of the universe. So yeah, those three things.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Can I ask you what brings you joy or hope?
I think lately, within the past like month or so, my sister and I have been working out together via Zoom every day. I'm not really somebody who loves working out, but it's been one, dedicated sister time, which I love and need, but it's just been time to kind of get out of my head and to just do something for me, and to give myself space to just kind of be and to honor my body and to honor all of the things that my body can do for me, all the places that it takes me. And that's been really great. And then cooking, I love to cook. When I was home for a little bit, I got to get some recipes from my mom and from my dad, both of whom are really great cooks. And it was great to practice those, and I'll be bringing those back. And my sister and I exchange recipes, and I just really love food, which is also great that I'm also exercising with my sister to balance. But I think food is really great, and then people as well. One of the best parts about my job is that I get to meet these really amazing students, and it's such an honor to get to read. If I'm reading an application, it's such an honor to get to read their stories, or if I'm talking to them, they often share really meaningful personal experiences, and it's not something that we take for granted. It's such a beautiful thing to get to hear about another person's life, and so that also brings me joy, the great number of wonderful students that I get to meet that way too.
Oh, I've had a chance. You're a really good cook too. I've had a chance to eat some of your cooking.
Oh,
Yeah, with one of the LASSO meetings, the Latin American Student Organization.
great, great.
Yeah, and food kind of also brings a lot of that together. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for your time. I thought this was such a wonderful conversation. If students want your information, it's on the website. I'm sure we'll get some students interested in philosophy that might have some questions for you. But thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Adriana. This has been such a pleasure, as always.
All right.